Alright, so let's go ahead and get started then in section 8.7. So as we alluded to at the end of fifth period today, really the only additional piece, the only thing that's going to be extra in what we've done Tuesday and Wednesday of this week is, in some cases, we're going to end up with quadratic equations that only give us one answer. Okay, and again, that will only happen that when we go to factor our expressions, we get the same factor repeated. Okay? But otherwise, everything else stays the exact same. So, I'm not teaching anything new. We're just going to kind of go through these and see what we come up with as we go. So, problem number 1. Q squared minus 100 is equal to 0. Alright? So, first thing we must always do is, again, make sure your equation is equal to 0. Check. Done. That's good to go. Okay? Now, is the left-hand side written as a product yet? No. Okay, so what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to factor that expression. So, Q squared and 100. Let's start with this. Do we have a greatest common factor? No. Okay. So if there is no greatest common factor, then let's factor using the magic X. Mulnick, what's my A times C value in this problem? My A is 1. My C is... Nope. Not my C. My B is 0. My C is... negative 100. So the product of A and C here is negative 100, and my B value is 0. So remember, this is what we call kind of the special case. If your sum is 0, what do you know? One's positive and one negative, and also they're the same number. So if you don't recall, how do you find that number if you don't know what it is off the top of your head? You square root 100. And if you square root 100, then you're left with 10. And we just said that one must be positive and one must be negative. So we've got positive 10, negative 10. Okay? Now, we had an A value that was 1 here. So as we go to factor this, this is going to be Q plus 10 times Q minus 10. This is equal to 0. Okay? How many answers are we going to have? 2. Why 2? Because they're different factors, ultimately, that's why. Okay? One's negative, one's positive. So now we're going to take Q plus 10 and set it equal to 0. And then we're going to also take Q minus 10 and set it equal to 0. Alright? If we solve the first one here by subtracting 10 from both sides, Q is going to be equal to a negative 10. Over here, we'd solve for Q by adding 10 to both sides, and Q should be equal to a positive 10. There's my 2 answers. Again, the only time we're going to end up with 1 is if my 2 factors end up being the exact same. Okay? Let's just keep going right through these. Let's get to example B. So again, our equation's already set equal to 0, so that's good. Okay? Next thing we'd ask is there a greatest common factor? And the answer is no. Okay? Evan, what's my A times C in this problem? Okay, so that's going to give me 25, and our B value is negative 10. Okay, 2 numbers that multiply to give me 25 and add to give me negative 10 are negative 5 and negative 5. Again, we had the original A value here was 1. So we're going to have R minus 5 times another R minus 5 is equal to 0. Okay? How many solutions should we have here? Just 1. Okay? This is the special case here. Okay? So if we take the first factor and set it equal to 0, and then you tried to take the second factor and set it equal to 0, you're getting to get the same thing. So there's no sense in setting the same problem up twice. Here we're just going to solve this one problem. We'll add 5 to both sides, and R needs to be equal to a positive 5. Alright, you guys are going to try C before we move on to D. Okay? So try C on your own. We'll come back, compare answers, and then we'll talk about example D here in a couple of minutes. Alright, so in this problem, if I take my A times C value, we're going to get 225, and our B value is 30. Okay, so two numbers that multiply to give you 225 and add to give you 30 are 15 and 15. Now, here's where you need to be careful. You can't just take these, set them equal to a 0 and solve, because this isn't the factored answer. We had an A value that wasn't 1, so what do we need to do with 9x plus 15? Now what do we have to do with both of those? You got to reduce those, okay? Divide the first one by 3, you can get 3x plus 5. Divide the second one by 3, get 3x plus 5, and now we're going to set that equal to 0, okay? If you're going to take 9x plus 15 and set it equal to 0 on Tuesday, that's not going to fly with me. You've got to reduce those each, okay? Because again, and remember how we talked about this. If you're factoring, you should be checking to see, does your f's give you that? And 9x times 9x is not 9x squared, so then that tells you you haven't reduced those, okay? How many answers are we going to have with this problem? We're only going to have one because it is the same factor in each of these. So now we're going to take 3x plus 5 and set that equal to 0, and then solve that one equation. Subtract 5 from both sides, so that 3x is equal to negative 5, and then we divide each side by 3, and x should be equal to a negative 5/3. And again, that's the only answer that shows up, because the factor expression, both factors were the exact same. Okay? Let's talk about D. We kind of talked about this already a little bit before lunch. Okay? Notice that this is just a binomial. Now, on your opener today, I gave you a binomial, and you solved it because you factored out a greatest common factor. Can you factor out a greatest common factor here? No. Okay? This one's a little different than the one we did as our opener. So, let's factor using the magic X. Okay? Lily, what is my A times C value in this problem going to be? Okay, and what is that? Miles, what's our B value? 0. Okay, so two numbers that multiply to give me negative 784 and add to give me 0 are what? 28 with a negative 28. Now, what's the first number I need to use in each of my parentheses, though? We got to use a 16. So 16x plus 28, followed by 16x minus 28. But I'm not done. I'm not ready to solve yet, because what do I need to do? Reduce. Both of those factors are divisible by what? By 4. 4x plus 7 and 4x minus 7. Now I'm ready to solve. Now, for those of you that recall, and I know Carly was one that did this earlier, okay? The other way to get your answer here, ladies and gentlemen, was to just square root those two numbers. Square root of 16 is what? 4 and 4. Square root of 49 is 7 and 7. One's positive, one's negative. So again, I don't care if you use the magic X or not, okay? I need you to be able to factor the expression. Okay, how many answers are we going to have here? 2, because your two factors are not the same. Okay? So we do need to take 4x plus 7 and set that equal to 0. And we need to take 4x minus 7 and set that equal to 0 and solve each of them. Subtract 7. Divide by 4. X is negative 7/4. Add 7. Divide by 4. And x is a positive 7/4. Okay, so we have two answers. They look like the same number, but one of them is a positive and one of them is a negative. So those definitely are two different answers. Okay? Questions on C or D? All right. So let's continue. Somebody tell me, when you look at both E and F, what jumps out at you? There's one thing that both of them have in common. And don't say, well, this one's this. They both have one thing in common that should jump out at us when we look at that expression. Evan? Nope. Graceland? The A values are negative in both of them. We're going to have to be factoring out a negative greatest common factor or somehow making our A values positive. Okay? So, in example E, notice that my A value is negative, but also notice what? So you got to make it equal to 0. Okay? But if my A value is negative, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to move that. Because if I move it to the other side, it's going to become what? It's going to become positive. You got to move one or the other, doesn't matter. So, just make sure that if you move your 98, that your greatest common factor includes a negative. So I have 0 equals 2m squared plus 28m plus 98. I would still, and I talked with a couple of you here, put your answers in standard form when you're doing this. Alright, so we have it equal to 0. Next thing we need to do is factor it. Is there a greatest common factor? Yep, we're going to pull a 2 out. Or if you moved everything to the other side, you're going to pull out a negative 2. Okay? So pull a 2 out. And you've got m squared plus 14m plus 49. Okay, are we going to need to worry about my greatest common factor to find part of my answer? No, Carly, you know that because it doesn't have a variable. Yeah? Or that little letter. Yeah. Alright. Factor using the magic X. A times C is going to be what? 49. B is two numbers that multiply to give us 49, add to give us 14 are 7 and 7. Now, luckily by factoring out the greatest common factor, we have an A value that's now 1. 0 equals 2 times m plus 7 times m plus 7. How many answers are we going to have here? Just one. Carly? Yep, absolutely. Yep. So then, take your one factor, set it equal to 0, and solve. My one answer should be m is negative 7. Alright, now, letter F. Graceland pointed out that we also have a negative A value here. Okay? Another thing that jumps out at me is there's only 2 terms in this entire problem. Okay? So, I'm going to tell you, like, it's not always going to be written in standard form for you. So if you need to rewrite this in standard form from the get-go to help you, then 100% do that. Okay? I'm not going to yet. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as it is, and I'm going to factor it because it's going to save me a little bit of time. Okay? So, I know I want to pull out a negative. Because my a value is negative, I want to make it positive, and I'm not going to move everything over to the other side just to make that work. Is there any other greatest common factors here? No. So what are we going to pull out? -1. Now, I'm going to write what I have left in parentheses in standard form. Okay? So I'm going to put this first. Is this going to be 9x squared or negative 9x squared? Right now it's negative 9x squared, so if I pull a negative out, it's going to be positive 9x squared. Okay? Then I'm going to put my 25 second. Is it going to be plus 25 or minus 25? Minus 25, because we're switching the signs on that. So I factored out my -1 and rewrote it into standard form for us. Okay? Well, let's go ahead and factor this one. A times C. Here's my A, here's my C. Should give me a negative 225 with a B value of 0. What are the numbers I'm looking for? Negative 15 and 15. Okay? What's the first number I need to use in each of my parentheses? A 9. So I've got 9x minus 15, 9x plus 15, but I'm not done because what do I need to do? I got to simplify. I'm also going to bring down my -1 here. 3x minus 5, 3x plus 5, that's equal to 0. Okay, so I factored my expression. How many answers am I going to have? 2. They're going to be opposites of one another. One positive, one negative, but I'm going to have two factors. Sorry, I have two different factors. So I'm going to have two different answers here. There's my two separate answers. I got x to be 5/3, and I also got x to be negative 5/3. All right, questions on E or F? All right, I'm going to give you about a 3-minute head start. Flip it over, do the two in the back. Alright, so in letter G, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our equation equal to 0. I like to keep my a value positive, so I moved everything over to the left. 16y squared minus 80y plus 100. Next thing I did is I pulled out the greatest common factor of 4. So I had 4y squared minus 20y plus 25 is equal to 0. I cannot emphasize this enough. You want to use the magic X, whatever you need to be able to do to factor. Okay? I'm not, and I didn't count it wrong on our last one if you didn't show your work, but like, I need you to be able to factor down to 4 times 2y minus 5 times 2y minus 5. I do expect to see this, but how you got there is up to you. Should only have one answer because this is the same factor showing up twice. So 2y minus 5 is equal to 0. Solve all of that, and y should turn out to be equal to 5 halves. Okay, Lily, question. What? Are we on G or H? Okay, I'm still on G. Okay? Questions on G? Alright, on H, we're going to make this equal to 0. Again, I like an A value that's going to be positive. Notice that this has an A and a C value, but this A and C can also all be divided by 5, so you'd better factor out a greatest common factor. So pull a 5 out, you're left with 4x squared minus 1. Okay? So if I'm going to do the magic X, I'm not going to get negative 100. I'm going to get negative 4 and 0. Does that make sense? Because I'm not doing the magic X here. I'm doing the magic X here. You don't do that until you factor a 5 out. So, 4x squared minus 1, and again, you want to do the shortcut that I showed you? Go for it. Like, there's a reason I showed it to you. We have 5 times 2x plus 1 times 2x minus 1. Okay? How many answers? 2. Because your factors, even though they look a lot alike, are slightly different. Going to end up, you can see the rest of the work from there. X is equal to a negative 1/2, and x is equal to a positive 1/2. Alright, questions on the back page here. Your homework for your 3.5-day weekend, okay, is going to be a worksheet. So just a quick reminder here before I hand that out. You have an assessment on Tuesday, okay? So when we come in, we will work through, or go through the 8.7 worksheet, then we're gonna go ahead and take our assessments, and then at the end of the class, well, I shouldn't say at the end of the class period, during 6th, I have a new lesson to teach. So Tuesday will be 5th period, we'll need to finish up with our assessment. If we need to spend time going over the homework, we will, and if not, we will just jump right into that.